Oh, you don't, you don't need to film that. We're upgrading this closet to a fully custom closet. We ripped out some carpet and I'm laying laminate flooring down. Let me show you some of the things that I learned when laying laminate. As with many projects, the prep of your surface is what takes a lot of the time, but it's very important. This previously had carpet on it, and when they did that, they were not very careful to sink all of the screws down below the surface of the subfloor. Didn't matter, they were putting carpet and padding on top of that. But when we rip that out, you need to make sure to get all of your tack strips out from your carpet, any stray nails, and then I went through on each of the screws and either sunk them down if they were able to be, or drove in a few more screws so that the surface was nice and uniform and flat. If it's necessary in your space, you might need to lay down a vapor barrier. The flooring that I have and many of the modern floorings actually have a vapor barrier built into them. That's how ours is. Plus, there is an air-conditioned space below this. We're on the second floor here in my house, and so there's no need to actually have a vapor barrier when you have a conditioned space below. Another thing that's helpful ahead of time as you're preparing to lay your laminate is to open a couple boxes and lay them out. There are usually a few patterns that they have, and you don't want two of the patterns right next to each other. It's not going to look as realistic. So do a little bit of work ahead of time and lay them out the way that you want them. These are the tools that you'll need. You can usually get these in a kit. I'll have one linked below that I picked up. It comes with a basic kind of phenolic block that has a lip on it so that you can catch that over the end of your flooring as you're hitting. It comes with a mallet, pretty standard, and then this little, I call it a Z tool. This hooks over the lip when you're near a corner and you're able to hit here if you can't get your mallet onto the edge. I did find I had a little better success with just a regular dead blow mallet. It just felt a little better to me than these, but many people just use these. If you're able to, I find it a lot easier to actually remove your base molding before you start laying your laminate. This gives you a little bit more wiggle room of where you can place the flooring so that you can cover it later with your molding. I'm gonna start off by measuring the distance of the room that we are covering. So all the way to the curb is 166 1/4. Okay, and then our pieces are 7 1/2. So I'm going to do 166.25 divided by 7.5, and that'll be 22 whole pieces, 0.166. So we need to figure out what that partial piece is going to be, and if it's going to be too small of a piece, we may want to kind of divide that and have a partial piece at the front and a partial piece so we don't end up with just a little piece down there. We did some calculation, and the partial piece that was left over is only going to be about 1.25 inches. This is actually bigger than 1.25 inches, so I don't think we want that small of a strip at the end of the room. I think it might look funny. Plus, since this is a floating floor, you don't want to have issues with that little piece wanting to flip up and that kind of stuff. You need a substantial piece. So I think we're going to kind of split the difference, and instead of starting with a whole width piece, we'll start with one that's, you know, something 3.5, 4 inches like this. We'll rip part of it down. That way, when we end down here, it should be about that same width piece at the end of the room, and we'll just kind of split that difference. Hopefully that made sense.
At this point, it had been quite a while since we had done the bedroom renovation and used this flooring, so we had to kind of reacquaint ourselves with how they go together before we got our game plan of moving through the closet and which direction to go. Typically, you want to start at the doorway and work toward the far side of the room.
Your walls may be a little bit different and the trim you're using may be different, but I recommend making kind of a story block. We cut these blocks to be exact for what our base molding is along with the shoe molding. So that way I can put this against the wall, make a mark, and when we're laying the flooring, we know if we're beyond that line, it's gonna be covered by trim, so we're good. It just, in other rooms that we've done, this has helped speed this along, and so I'm just gonna go along and make these marks and we can get going. The way I built these cabinets, we wanted more height in the cabinet, so we're not allowing enough for a base molding. So we're just doing shoe molds straight against here. So I'm not going to use my block to show that. I'm just going to use a piece of the shoe mold and kind of mark and do the same thing. That way we know when we'll be able to cover what flooring we put down. As you can see, I can't get the laminate under the casing here on the door. So the easiest way is to take a scrap piece that you have. I like to use these multi-tools and just rest it on there and cut away your door frame so that this can slide underneath. You'll get a much better look. You gotta be kidding me. Where the tile is, you can't get it exactly up there, so I'm probably going to use the same piece of shoe mold, but instead of standing it up tall, I'll probably just put it down like that. I think that'll look just fine. So when we're totally done, I can come back and just use a little bit of silicone or some caulk and just put it there and just secure it. I think it'll look great. So I've got the piece down here. You can see it goes up under here nicely. Our previous folks, whoever installed this doorway, made a nice notch here, so this piece popped out. I've kind of repaired it and I'm going to do some touch-up work later, but this goes up under there plenty far. You see we're past our mark I was telling you about, so we're good. Like, this is all going to be covered by trim, so I don't have to make any cuts. 43.25. And we are keeping this side. Okay. I don't have that. There are a few ways you can cut laminate. You could probably use a handsaw, and there are actual laminate saws. A lot of people will use a straight edge and they'll just take a razor knife and just score it really hard and then it'll snap in that spot. I have this little miter saw, so that's what I'm going to use, and it works just fine. All right, I'm gonna move this big guy. My initial thought is to put these together, but they only have this one little point of contact here, and when you go to push them in, they wanna kind of come apart. So when you're dealing with small pieces like this, I usually like to go to the next row and go ahead and get those connected and slide them all in place. Yep, 43.25. This is the keep side. What am I hitting? I think it's in there. Now we'll put this whole thing up under there, and it wants to stay together better now that it's kind of a whole unit. We'll just slide it all the way under the door as far as we can go. And I'm beyond my line on both sides. So we're good. All that's going to get covered by trim. All that's going to get covered by trim. Something to remember as you go and you're hitting your new pieces into these. This is just a floating floor. So you need to make sure to stand weight on the floor you've already laid as you're hitting it in, and then constantly check to make sure you're not hitting it out of where it needs to be. If you need to and you're working on a subfloor like this, I have in the past run some screws just partially into the subfloor at the edge. That way when you're hammering, your flooring kind of hits up against your screws and holds itself in place. Then you can just back the screws out when you're done, put your trim down, move on.
The way that seemed to work best for me was to kind of lift the new row that you're putting in until it drops down into the tongue. Then you're able to hit on the end with that block and it seats itself fully. Sometimes it does take a good bit of persuasion though.
Let's do 17. This is why it's good not to have your trim on, because you have much more room before you actually run into something. You don't have to be as careful. Like I could have cut that anywhere between this line and there and it would have still covered. $35 1/8 should get us. All right. I'm trying to be as random as I can with the seam placement. You don't have to overthink this. Some people say you try not to stair step them, but as long as the seams are staggered every few rows, I figure that's good enough. Okay, put this one in line and measure. It's like 9 1/4. This is off a little right here. We'll be able to tap it in. That did it. Good. Our seams are staggered. We're just going to keep going. I came across an example of what you don't want to do. So I was just laying a whole sheet here, and you see how we only ended up with like a little 2-inch piece. That just won't hold on there well because this is a floating floor. You need more than just a 2-inch piece. So before I continue on this row, I'm just going to cut this one down shorter to stagger our seams, and that way we'll have a larger piece on this end. For this next row, it's going to be a partial, so we have to do some cuts. What I'm going to do is up here on top of my flooring, I've measured, and I'm going to put this row together like you've seen me doing. And that way, as a whole unit, if I can get it, if I can get it to line up, as a whole unit, I can kind of measure and get it marked where it needs to be. So what we'll do is we'll just come up here. I'm pretty pleased with how square that is. Go down a little more. So we're good there. I'm just gonna mark to make sure I have plenty of room. That will be, see, we'll be covered to here with molding. So I'm gonna mark here. There's no reason to be too tight on it. And I'm gonna mark here, kind of split the difference. Then we just need to figure out how much we need to cut in on the long side here. So I'll just measure to the cabinet, a little past where I'll get covered. Looks like 4 1/4. Yes, that was a question. 4 1/4 should do fine. So then we will just come off of this edge, 4 1/4. No, we're keeping 4 1/4. So 4 1/4 off of here. Hard to see this pencil. 4 1/4 to here. So we're going to eliminate this all the way down. We'll do that on both sides. Okay, what are we keeping? Because this goes here, so this is all bye-bye. Thought this thing had a light on it. Couldn't really see that line very well. I'm hitting right there.
It took a couple of times of me trimming this corner to get it just right, but I didn't want to trim too much off and accidentally see a gap. So take your time if you're doing this and make sure it's right.
That's gonna cover, that's gonna cover. Where's our little cheat sheet just to make sure? The good thing is, in between these cabinets, we can just use a single piece. In fact, I'll have to cut a little bit off of each, but that's nice because we don't have to worry about seams in here. We're just gonna go through and time lapse this and run all the way back to the window wall. Last one, let's hope it fits. Oh, I haven't cut it down on the width.
Tease.
Take two. Let's try this again.
What happened the first time?
You didn't measure or something.
No, I was too preoccupied.
Okay. Oh, we're within tolerance. Oh yeah. 'Cause our line is way back. Sweet. And I can get the Z-tool in here. Do a little poundy pound. And this is what I was talking about, why it's important to take your base off, because that looks like a really large gap, but because we took the base molding and then we're adding shoe molding, that'll all be covered. So it's much easier. I'm gonna go through and mark the studs so that I can be sure to hit those when I'm putting the base molding back on. I need to mark below because all of this is already finished painted. Should be one in the corner. This was that weird wall that only has them every so often. We were smart and thought ahead when we took these off, since we're reusing the base, and we numbered them. So we took them off in a certain order around the room. We just have to put them back on in the opposite order because some of these happen to have some coping on them. They'll fit back on just fine. I can't see my lines. Since I'm a dummy, I was like, oh, put the marks here where the studs are, because then it'll cover it up. It'll cover it up and you won't be able to see where the studs are. So let's go a different route, shall we? Let's put just a little something something where our studs are, and maybe we can actually see it. Huh? Okay, let's don't be stupid. Try this again. All right. Put one right there. Boom. Don't even think I need another one right there.
If you look carefully, you can see some little pieces that I am resting the base molding on. That is because this had carpet on it previously, so the base molding was installed at a certain height. To get it back to that height, because I did not finish fully with paint and everything else, I just cut some spacers that put it at that exact height. That way I could rest the base molding on that and shoot them in. This would all get covered by the shoe mold later, so it's not a big deal. Oh man, so close. Can we get it to go? Yeah, a little scrapey scrape. That's all right.
Can't get it. All right, onto the shoe mold. I didn't have to use it on this project, but in one of the other rooms where we laid this flooring, I could not get that Z-tool over in the corner. I just was having the hardest time. And something that I did was I found a long piece of plywood. I put some blue tape, some painter's tape on one side, stuck some to the floor. Then I used some Starbond CA glue and activator on that so it wouldn't get anything on the floor. Held it for a little bit so that it could activate. And then I actually used that as the thing that I hit against. And it's not gonna last forever, but that seemed to work pretty well. And then when you're done, you just pop it off of there and rip the tape up and you're done. Starbond is an affiliate of mine, so if you want to pick some of this up, you can save 15%. I'll have a coupon code down in the description. I've got all the shoe molding painted and ready to install, so I'm just going to throw on a time lapse while I fit it all the way around, make a few cuts, and it should be pretty quick.
Sorry about all of the banding or black lines in the shot here. This was a new light, that Milwaukee light that you see there, and apparently it puts out a flicker kind of frequency when I'm using one of my cameras. So I'm learning how to adjust to that, and just bear with me.
That's really all there is to laying laminate flooring. It's not that difficult. It can be a little frustrating sometimes to hammer on those things and get them to go together, but hopefully that helped you. See ya.